Emerged from Dartford. To begin our journey, we look at the early life of a man who would redefine music. Few rock legends have lived as boldly and chaotically as Mick Jagger. From his time as the leader of the Rolling Stones and co-author of some of rock's greatest anthems to being the father of 8 children with 5 different women, Jagger's life is full of scandals and surprises. Behind those electrifying performances lies a man who has spent decades juggling fame, addictions, strained relationships, and decisions that shocked both his fans and his bandmates. Today, after more than 60 years on stage and 81 years of life, Jagger finally lifts the curtain on truths long suspected but rarely expressed. Let's dive into the extraordinary journey of a man who changed music and is now revealing what truly shaped him. Michael Philip Jagger was born in July in the small English town of Dartford in Kent, coming into the world during a climate of uncertainty. World War II was still raging, casting shadows of anxiety and resilience over Great Britain. His father, Basil Joe Jagger, embodied discipline and structure, working as a physical education teacher and becoming known for introducing basketball into British schools. His mother, Eva Hensley Mary, brought warmth and vitality to the home. A seamstress by trade, she carried the bold spirit of her hometown of Sydney, Australia, along with a passion for conservative politics that would, in its own way, shape her son's worldview. Together, they offered young Mick and his younger brother Chris a balance between firmness and curiosity. From these early years, music seemed to naturally infuse itself into Jagger's life. Unlike many of his contemporaries who came from musical families, Mick's attraction to sound came from within himself. He joined the local church choir as a child, not out of obligation, but out of a love for singing. Whether it was a hymn or a popular tune crackling on the family radio, Mick absorbed it all. The BBC with its formal programming and Radio Luxembourg with its bolder repertoire of American R&B and blues became his informal teachers. He didn't just listen, he studied, imitated, and dreamed. September marked a key moment when Mick, aged 6, entered Wentworth Primary School. It was there that he met Keith Richards, a classmate who shared his growing fascination with music. Their friendship was immediate, fueled by common interests and the simple joys of childhood. Together, they played and talked about the music that excited them. But life decided otherwise in 1954 when Mick was 11, and the Jaggers moved to Wilmington, breaking that early bond. The two boys then followed separate paths, with Mick immersing himself in his studies at Dartford Grammar School, where he excelled, driven by ambition and undoubtedly by the expectations placed upon him. Throughout his schooling, Jagger juggled 2 worlds. On one hand, he was the diligent student, earning 7 O-levels and 2 A-levels, preparing for a conventional career. On the other, he secretly nurtured his musical passion. In the late 1950s, as a teenager, he formed a small garage band with his friend Dick Taylor. He covered songs by Muddy Waters, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and other heroes of American blues, tracking down their records with almost missionary zeal. For them, these songs weren't just tunes. They were gateways to another world made of raw emotion, rebellion, and authenticity. Conquering the world, the rise, losses, and scandals of the Rolling Stones. Moving forward, we witnessed the moment that changed rock history forever. The true turning point occurred on October 17, 1961. That morning, on platform number 2 of the Dartford station, Jagger spotted a familiar face, Keith Richards. 7 years had passed since their last meeting, but the connection was instantaneous. Mick was carrying a few precious records under his arm, including albums by Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters. Keith's eyes lit up. This chance encounter wasn't just a reunion of old classmates. It was the awakening of a musical partnership that would soon shatter rock history. In the following weeks, Mick and Keith began to see each other regularly. They listened, played, and dreamed. Quickly, they reformed a group with Dick Taylor, joined by Alan Etherington and Bob Beckwith, to found the Blues Boys. They practiced relentlessly, seeking to master the raw, soulful sound of Chicago blues that they admired so much. While other teenagers their age were content with school dances or football matches, Jagger was pursuing something else, a sound, an emotion, a calling. In parallel, he continued his studies at the London School of Economics, having obtained a government scholarship thanks to his excellent academic results. He studied finance and accounting there, and for a moment it seemed he might follow a very different path, perhaps toward journalism, politics, or business. Jagger later acknowledged having seriously considered these options. He even reflected on the fact that a career in politics might have resembled that of a pop star, given the charisma and public staging that both required. But no lecture hall could compete with the allure of the blues, and no textbook could capture the excitement of a new riff or a new lyric shared with Keith. As 1962 approached, their informal rehearsals and small concerts with the Blues Boys paved the way for a greater ambition. The trio soon joined Brian Jones and Ian Stewart, and what had started as improvised sessions transformed into something electric. The Rolling Stones were born, not from a grandiose plan, but from the passion and audacity of young men in pursuit of a sound that would soon captivate the world. The journey of the Rolling Stones from unpolished London hopefuls to global rock icons is as much a story of music as it is of challenges, tragedy, and survival. It all began on July 12, 1962, at the Marquee Club on Oxford Street. That night, they weren't yet called the Rolling Stones, but the Rollin' Stones, a name borrowed from a Muddy Waters song that reflected their deep admiration for American blues. Their equipment was cobbled together, largely borrowed from friends like Alexis Corner of Blues Incorporated. What they lacked in resources, they made up for with raw energy. The lineup included Mick Jagger on vocals, Keith Richards and Brian Jones on guitar, Ian Stewart on piano, Dick Taylor on bass, and Mick Avery, not Tony Chapman as often reported, on drums. The pay was meager, but a seed had been planted. By 1963, rumors of their rough and electrifying concerts had spread. That year, the Stones secured a 5-month residency at the Eel Pie Island Hotel, a bohemian hotspot on the Thames. This residency refined their sound and tightened their bonds as a group. Around this time, a young manager named Andrew Loog Oldham entered the scene. Barely in his 20s, Oldham saw the Stones not just as a band, but as a brand. He shaped their image in opposition to the Beatles, tougher, more dangerous, less polished. But Oldham's greatest contribution was pushing Mick Jagger and Keith Richards to write their own songs. Reluctant at first, they quickly unleashed a songwriting partnership that would define rock for decades. Their first original tracks, The Last Time in 1965, and then the seismic I Can't Get No Satisfaction, set them apart. Satisfaction captured the frustration of youth in a changing world with its distorted riff and mocking lyrics. The song reached #1 in the United States and the United Kingdom, solidifying the Stones' image as guitar-wielding rebels. Other hits followed: Paint It Black, Ruby Tuesday, Let's Spend the Night Together, songs that became anthems for a generation eager to break conventions. Scandals, legal battles, and tragedies. As their fame grew, so did the controversies that followed them. With fame came surveillance. In 1967, a series of articles pointed the finger at the unbridled lifestyle of pop stars, placing the Stones at the center of controversy. The first article targeted Donovan, but the second attacked the Stones. It claimed to have seen Mick Jagger consuming drugs in a club, even though it was later discovered that the journalist had confused Brian Jones with Mick. Regardless, the damage was done. Police raided Keith Richards' Redlands estate. Jagger and Richards faced legal trouble for what were considered minor offenses, sparking public sympathy and fueling the debate over the fair treatment of celebrities. Their sentences, 3 months for Jagger and 1 year for Richards, were severe, perceived as a warning addressed to the counterculture. The outcry was immediate. Even the Times, under the conservative leadership of William Rees-Mogg, took their defense by publishing a now-famous editorial, "Who breaks a butterfly on a wheel?" On appeal, the sentences were reduced, but the Stones' reputation as outlaws was sealed. Then came a more intimate tragedy. Brian Jones, the brilliant multi-instrumentalist who had co-founded the group and given it its name, was falling apart. His personal and legal problems made it difficult for him to participate in the group's international projects, isolating him more and more. In June 1969, the tension became unbearable. Jagger, Richards, and drummer Charlie Watts visited Jones at his home in Sussex, Cotchford Farm. Brian agreed to leave the group. He was replaced by the young and talented guitarist Mick Taylor. Less than a month later, on July 3, 1969, Brian Jones tragically passed away at his home. It was a shock for the group. He was 27 years old. This loss deeply shook the Stones. 2 days later, they were scheduled to give a large free concert in Hyde Park, a show that then took on the air of a commemoration. Dressed in white, Jagger took the stage and read excerpts from Out on Ice, Percy Bysshe Shelley's elegy for John Keats. Then, as thousands of butterflies were released into the sky, the group began their set. Tracks like Honky Tonk Women, released the day before, resonated through the park, blending grief with tribute. But fate wasn't finished with them. On December 6, 1969, during the Altamont Free Concert in California, what was supposed to be a West Coast Woodstock turned into chaos. The Stones, buoyed by the success of Let It Bleed, had recruited members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club to provide security. This was managed by a group ill-prepared for the scale of the event, and the tension escalated. The atmosphere was heavy from the moment Jagger arrived, as he was punched in the face by a fan before even reaching the stage. After nightfall during Under My Thumb, an altercation near the stage turned tragic, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be a musical celebration. The Stones, unaware of the full horror unfolding, continued to play, fearing that stopping would trigger a riot. These tragic events were immortalized in Gimme Shelter, inscribing them forever in the group's history. Jagger later admitted to being terrified that night, haunted by the proximity of danger. The press condemned the group for the decisions that led to the catastrophe. What was supposed to crown the years as a triumph of peace and music became instead a dark symbol of the hidden side of that era. Through all of this, the Rolling Stones held firm, bruised and sobered, but not broken. Their legend grew not only because of their music, but because they had walked through fire and continued their journey, conquering the world one scandal, one loss, and one rebellious song at a time. The 1980s and the collapse of the Glimmer Twins. Next, we explore the internal conflicts that nearly tore the band apart. During much of the 1970s, despite the turbulence, the Jagger-Richards partnership churned out successes. Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Saint, Some Girls. But at the dawn of the 1980s, the cracks widened. MTV disrupted the musical world, and Jagger's thirst for experimentation came into conflict with Richards' attachment to the Stones' roots. When Jagger launched his solo career with She's the Boss in 1985 and then Primitive Cool, Richards felt abandoned. Their 1986 album Dirty Work reflected the rupture, a disjointed record where the group often recorded separately. Richards mocked Jagger by nicknaming him Brenda and Her Majesty, jabs against what he perceived as an oversized ego and diva-like behavior. Richards' memoirs, Life, did not spare Jagger, describing their relationship as strained for decades and accusing him of letting fame go to his head. But Jagger was not without responsibility in fueling these tensions. By accepting a knighthood in 2003, which Richards openly criticized as incompatible with their rebel image, he widened the gap even further. Yet behind the public jabs remained a complex bond that neither could break. As Richards said, they were no longer just friends, but brothers forever linked by music, history, and the weight of everything they had built. The father, the lover, the man behind the myth now. Let's look at the personal life of the man behind the rock star persona. For decades, Mick Jagger's assured presence on stage, his magnetic charm, and his inexhaustible energy defined what it meant to be a rock star. But behind the bright lights, the cheering crowds, and the iconic riffs lay a man whose personal life was often as chaotic and turbulent as his most wild performances. Mick Jagger, despite his fame and fortune, has led an existence marked by complex relationships, heartbreaking losses, and the quiet, often unrecognized role of a father, which shaped him in a way that few people truly understand. Jagger's first true love story dates back to the mid-1960s when he fell in love with Marianne Faithfull, the ethereal singer and actress who became both his muse and his partner during some of the Stones' most creative years. Together, they embodied the excesses and beauty of the London scene of the 60s, but their relationship, intense and passionate, was marked by tragedy. In 1969, Faithfull became pregnant with Jagger's child, a girl they planned to call Karina. The joy was short-lived. They experienced an extremely painful loss during that time, which constituted a turning point in their relationship. Faithfull later remembered this period, explaining how each had coped. She sank into her own demons while Jagger immersed himself in work, perhaps to manage their shared grief. This loss already foreshadowed the instability that would haunt many of his future relationships. In 1970, Jagger began an affair with Marcia Hunt, the American singer and actress with striking charm, although she was married at the time. Their relationship was brief but significant. In November of the same year, Marcia gave birth to Karis Jagger, Mick's first child. The relationship ended, but Karis remained a quiet anchor in Mick's life, a daughter he supported even as his romantic adventures continued to make headlines. Then came Bianca Perez Mora Macias, the glamorous Nicaraguan socialite, who became Mrs. Mick Jagger during a lavish wedding in 1971 in Saint-Tropez. Their union seemed to promise stability for a time. Together they welcomed Jade Jagger in October 1971. But fame, temptation, and the frantic pace of Mick's tours took their toll on the couple. Bianca, fiercely independent and refusing to accept his infidelities, filed for divorce in 1978, citing his countless affairs as the cause of the breakup. Bianca later stated that her marriage had ended the very day it began, a brutal observation on the price to be paid for uniting with rock's most famous seducer. Without wasting time, Jagger's heart and other appetites found a new partner in Jerry Hall. The Texan model with sun-kissed hair became his most enduring companion over the next 2 decades. Their relationship began in 1977, and although they only made it official during a ceremony in Bali in 1990, later judged invalid, their union gave birth to 4 children, Elizabeth, James, Georgia, and Gabriel. But even Jerry, with all her grace and patience, could not endure Mick's infidelities. His affair with Brazilian model and host Luciana Gimenez in the late 1990s resulted in the birth of his child, Lucas. This revelation shattered what remained of his union with Jerry, and in 1999, the relationship, like so many before it, collapsed. Perhaps the deepest and most intimate pain of Jagger's life occurred much later in 2014. While on tour in Australia, he learned of the sudden and tragic passing of his longtime companion, stylist Loren Scott. Loren, elegant, creative, and very discreet, had been by his side for over 10 years, providing him with a silent support that Mick rarely knew. This loss was an immense shock. For once, the usually reserved leader showed a rare vulnerability, publicly expressing his grief and distress in a sincere message. From this darkness was born a more peaceful chapter. Mick found comfort in a new meaning with American ballet dancer Melanie Hamrick, with whom he welcomed his child Devereaux in 2016. Jagger, then 73 years old, found himself in unknown territory, an aging father learning to raise a young child while reflecting on his journey. At 80, Jagger admitted in an interview that fatherhood at this stage seemed strange to him. He acknowledged feeling out of practice, explaining that his approach was more relaxed, letting it happen, as he put it, but that he was determined to support and encourage his son's unique path, accepting the truth. Finally, we reflect on the wisdom Jagger has gained over the years. At 81, Mick Jagger has begun to deliver reflections that drop the mask of the untouchable rock legend. In recent interviews, he has spoken frankly about the realities behind the fame. Jagger admits that being a rock star, despite its thrills, has often left him intellectually unfulfilled. He described the role as intellectually undemanding and confessed that in his youth, he had seriously considered becoming a teacher or a journalist, paths that he believes might have brought him another type of accomplishment. His early fascination with writing and politics was authentic, and he sometimes wonders how his life would have evolved if he had pursued them. Jagger has also discussed the emotional cost of the persona he built for himself. The incessant tours, as exhilarating as they were on stage, often left him isolated. He spoke bluntly about moments of deep loneliness, particularly during long absences away from his family and friends. His relationship with Keith Richards, though enduring, reflects the price of their shared success. Jagger acknowledges the rivalry that at times became bitter. The years brought clashes over control, vision, and ego, conflicts that tested the bond born on a station platform in Dartford. Yet despite the tensions, Jagger admits that their musical connection has always brought them back to each other, stronger than words. Today, Jagger views his place on stage differently. The thirst for dominance has subsided, replaced by the desire to create and share. His recent work on Hackney Diamonds, alongside artists like Lady Gaga and Paul McCartney, reflects this change in perspective. No longer to prove, but to transmit. Jagger jokes about the idea of a post-mortem tour where technology could one day allow the Stones to continue playing after his passing. The story of Mick Jagger is made of talent, torment, and transformation. After all these decades, what is your favorite Rolling Stones song or moment? Share it in the comments. If this story changed the way you look at the legends of rock history, please subscribe and like our channel. We are excavating the history they tried to bury. Plant the seeds for the future. The next treasure will be revealed soon.